The cafe on Grant Street had always been the kind of place that made people feel like they belonged. Its exposed brick walls, mismatched chairs, and warm yellow lights gave it a charm that couldn't be replicated by newer, trendier spots. It was nestled between a used bookstore and a vintage record shop, and during the week it was filled with remote workers sipping lattes, students cramming for exams, and elderly locals chatting about the weather. On this particular Friday afternoon, the usual bustle filled the air, the scent of freshly ground beans, the soft murmur of conversations, and the rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine. Behind the counter, a barista named Chloe worked with practiced ease, handing off drinks with a smile and a quick enjoy. Marcus stepped into the cafe with a book under his arm and earbuds in his pocket. He had just wrapped up a long morning at the community center where he volunteered, helping organize a mentorship program for high school students. Dressed in a dark green sweater and jeans, he looked like any other young professional taking a break from a busy day. He loved this place, not because it had the best coffee, although it was good, but because it usually felt like a little pocket of peace in the middle of a chaotic city. Marcus had been coming here for months. The staff knew his name. He always ordered the same thing, a chai latte with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon on top. It was simple, comforting, and warm, much like what this cafe had always represented to him. He joined the short line and waited patiently. A couple in front of him giggled over something on their phone. A guy behind him tapped impatiently on the floor with his heel. When Marcus reached the front, Chloe had just stepped away to grab more cups. Another barista, a guy Marcus didn't recognize, took over the register. "Hi there," Marcus said with a polite smile. "Chai latte with oat milk, cinnamon on top." The barista, whose name tag read Evan, didn't look up. He kept wiping the counter as though Marcus wasn't even there. Marcus paused, assuming Evan hadn't heard him. "Sorry, chai latte with oat milk, please." Still no response. Chloe returned, giving Evan a look. "You good?" she asked, glancing at Marcus. "Yeah," Evan mumbled, finally stepping aside so Chloe could ring him up. She offered Marcus a quick, apologetic smile. "Sorry about that. One chai oat cinnamon?" she said, as if to confirm. Marcus nodded, keeping his tone light. "You know me too well." But something about Evan's behavior stuck with him. The indifference, the deliberate avoidance. It wasn't just rudeness, it felt pointed. Still, Marcus let it go. Everyone had bad days. He moved to the pickup counter and scrolled through his phone as he waited. A few minutes passed. Orders came and went. Drinks for Sam, for Kylie, for Raj, but not his. He looked up to see Evan placing drinks on the counter, calling out names. Chloe was now in the back room. Marcus walked up gently, not wanting to come off as pushy. Hey, just checking. Chai oat with cinnamon?" he asked. Evan didn't respond. Instead, he reached for a cold brew and handed it to the customer next to Marcus. Then, without even glancing his way, he turned and began making a new drink. Marcus stood for a moment, unsure what to do. Had his drink been missed? Forgotten? He waited a few more minutes. Still nothing. Eventually, he leaned slightly over the counter, catching Evan's eye. "Sorry to bother, but I think my order might have been skipped." Evan gave a tight smile, not kind, not apologetic. "We're busy, I'll get to it." Marcus took a step back, jaw tightening. The line behind him had thinned. People were now sitting with their drinks, chatting, laughing, working. His stomach clenched, not from hunger, but from that familiar sense of being singled out. Marcus moved to an empty spot by the wall, arms crossed loosely, watching as Evan continued to serve customers with mechanical efficiency, smiling at some, chatting briefly with others, but never once glancing Marcus's way. 15 minutes passed. Chloe reappeared behind the counter. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus, then to the drink queue, brows knitting slightly. She leaned in and asked Evan something quietly. He shrugged, then turned away. A moment later, Chloe stepped over. "Hey, Marcus, you get your drink yet?" He shook his head gently. "Not yet." Her face fell. "Seriously? I'm so sorry. I'll make it right now." She moved quickly, hands fluid and precise, the way only someone who had made 1,000 lattes before could do. Marcus thanked her when she handed over the drink, warm cup pressing against his palms like a little anchor to hold on to. He found a seat near the window. It overlooked the sidewalk, where people bustled past, carrying groceries, walking dogs, checking their watches. Normal life. But inside Marcus, the normalcy had cracked a bit. He wasn't unfamiliar with this feeling. It wasn't new. That quiet dismissal, that vague undercurrent of "you don't belong here." It didn't come with shouts or slurs. It came in silences, in glances not returned, in voices that only greeted certain faces. Marcus tried to let it roll off him, but it stuck like damp clothes in winter, uncomfortable, cold, hard to shake. He opened the book he had brought, trying to distract himself, but the words blurred on the page. His mind was still standing at the counter, reliving every second. He hated that it had affected him so much. Hated that it still did. Across the room, Evan laughed with another customer, a young woman in a sunflower yellow dress. She had walked in long after Marcus but had her drink in minutes. They were chatting like old friends. Her drink was on the house. Marcus stared down at his cup. The cinnamon swirl was starting to melt into the foam. A man nearby, maybe mid-30s, beard, laptop open, leaned slightly toward Marcus. His voice was low. "Hey, I saw what happened back there. That wasn't right." Marcus glanced up, caught off guard. "Thanks," he said, unsure what else to say. The man nodded, not pushing the conversation further, but his acknowledgement meant something. A small lifeline, proof that he hadn't imagined it all. Marcus had spent most of his adult life walking the careful line between speaking up and keeping peace. Always weighing. Will this make a scene? Will they say I'm overreacting? Will it even matter? He turned to look at Evan again, who was now wiping down the espresso machine, face calm, unbothered. Marcus wondered if he even knew what he had done, or if, worse, he knew exactly and didn't care. He took out his phone, opened the Notes app, and began to type. The words flowed into Marcus's phone like water through a crack in stone. "Today, I walked into a place that's supposed to feel welcoming. I've been coming here for months, and for the first time, I felt like a ghost." He paused, thumb hovering over the screen. It wasn't loud. No one yelled at me. No one told me to leave. But silence, when it's intentional, can be just as loud. He looked up from his phone and around the cafe. Nothing had changed. People were still sipping their drinks, tapping away on laptops, chatting about their weekend plans. Evan was still behind the bar, folding napkins like he didn't have a care in the world. Marcus felt his heartbeat in his throat. He hated this kind of moment, the one where his dignity scraped against someone else's indifference. Being ignored deliberately is a special kind of hurt, especially when you've done nothing wrong, especially when others get smiles and free drinks while you get nothing. He stopped again, unsure if he wanted to post this anywhere, or just keep it as a journal entry. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was that it had happened, that he'd noticed, that he wasn't gaslighting himself into thinking he was being too sensitive. He closed the note and set his phone down beside his cup. He stared into the chai, which was now lukewarm. Part of him wanted to get up and leave. Another part, the quieter but sturdier one, told him to stay. He had stayed quiet too many times before. Just then, Chloe walked by again, collecting empty mugs from nearby tables. She caught his eye. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks again for the drink." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes, as if she sensed there was more he wasn't saying. He thought about telling her. Maybe not everything, but enough. But then he saw Evan glance over. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that look, Marcus saw no guilt, no apology, no discomfort, just indifference. He looked back at Chloe and changed his mind. "It's fine," he said. She gave a small nod and moved on. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He had worked so hard in life to be seen as equal, not exceptional, not invisible, just equal. And yet, situations like this still happened, subtle, denied, dismissed. The kind of experience that, when retold, often earned shrugs or worse. Maybe he was just busy. Maybe you're reading into it. But Marcus had lived in his skin long enough to know when something wasn't just a misunderstanding. He glanced out the window again. A young boy was walking past with his father. The boy had a big blue balloon and a chocolate-smeared smile. They laughed about something, and Marcus felt a strange twist in his chest, part joy, part ache. He remembered when he was that age, when his mother had taken him to diners and ice cream shops and told him to always be polite, stay calm, and smile, no matter how they treat you. He had smiled. He had stayed calm. And yet, here he was, still being tested. Marcus picked up his drink again, now barely warm, and took a sip. The flavor was still there, spicy, sweet, comforting, but the comfort felt forced, like it didn't belong anymore. He pulled his hoodie tighter around his shoulders and scanned the room one more time. Evan was now deep in conversation with another customer, this one a man in a Patagonia fleece. They laughed easily, shared a fist bump. Marcus looked down. He thought of how often this happened in little ways. The job interviews that ended with "we'll be in touch," and never were. The way some shopkeepers followed him with their eyes, but not his white friends. The nervous glances in elevators, the subtle step aside on sidewalks. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Never sharp enough to scream, always just enough to sting. He glanced again at the man from earlier, the one who had whispered his support. Their eyes met for a second time. This time, the man gave a slight nod, respectful, quiet. That small gesture, it mattered more than it should have. Marcus stood up and walked slowly toward the bar, cup in hand. Chloe noticed him approaching and looked up from the milk frother. "Need anything?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, then leaned in slightly, his voice low but clear. "Actually, yeah, can I talk to you for a second?" Chloe wiped her hands on a towel and stepped over. "Sure. I'm not trying to cause trouble," Marcus began, choosing his words carefully. "But I felt like your coworker, Evan, was avoiding me earlier. It wasn't just busy. He looked right at me, more than once." Chloe's eyes softened. She nodded slowly. "I noticed something, too. I didn't want to assume, but yeah, I'm really sorry that happened." Marcus gave a tight smile. "It's not your fault, I've been coming here a long time. Never had a problem before. Today felt different." Chloe looked down, jaw tensing slightly. "I'll talk to the manager, seriously, that's not what this place is about." He nodded, appreciating her sincerity. "Thanks, I just wanted someone to hear it." "You were heard," she said. And this time her smile reached her eyes. Marcus turned and headed back to his seat, unsure if anything would come of that conversation, but relieved, at least, that he had said something. Marcus sat back down, his heart still beating a little faster than normal. Speaking up, even gently, always carried weight. Not because he expected conflict, but because he never knew if it would be brushed off, ignored, or turned against him. He stared at his drink, now nearly cold, then took another sip anyway. Around him, the cafe continued like nothing had happened. People still laughed, baristas still poured foam hearts into lattes, music still played softly in the background. But for Marcus, something had shifted. He didn't feel like a regular anymore. He felt like a question mark, something uncertain, possibly unwelcome, floating in a space that used to feel like his. Evan hadn't looked his way since. Whether that was out of guilt or indifference, Marcus didn't know, but it was clear he wasn't concerned. Moments later, the cafe door opened and a man in his 40s stepped in. Gray blazer, purposeful stride, clipboard in hand. He looked familiar. Marcus realized it was Adam, the cafe's manager. He hadn't seen him in a while, but he remembered his friendly energy. Adam went straight behind the counter and said something quietly to Chloe. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus for a brief second. Adam followed that gaze, then nodded once. A few minutes later, Adam stepped out from behind the bar and approached Marcus's table. "Hey," he said, soft voice, respectful posture. "Mind if I join you for a second?" Marcus gestured to the seat across from him. "Sure." Adam sat down, hands resting lightly on the table. Chloe filled me in. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry. That's not the kind of experience anyone should have here." Marcus stayed quiet, giving Adam space to continue. "I know this place means something to a lot of people. It's supposed to be inclusive, no matter who you are. If that didn't come across today, we've failed." Marcus nodded once, appreciative but cautious. "I didn't come here expecting a problem. I just wanted my usual, but I felt invisible. And that's not new to me, which is why it hits a little harder." Adam let that settle. "I get it, or I'm trying to." He leaned in slightly. "We're going to have a conversation with Evan. What happens after depends on how he responds. But I promise you we'll take this seriously." Marcus exhaled slowly. It was something. Maybe not justice, but at least accountability. "Thanks for coming over," he said finally. "Really?" Adam stood and offered a hand. Marcus shook it, firm but not aggressive. It wasn't about anger, it was about being seen. After Adam left, Marcus remained seated for a while longer, letting the conversation settle. The cold chai in his hands no longer mattered. It had done its job. It wasn't about the drink anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The cafe slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, but now Marcus noticed something different in the air. A few glances came his way, not pitying, not curious, just aware. People who had seen what happened or felt something had shifted, and now understood more than they did an hour ago. He appreciated the silence more this time. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't the kind that pressed down on him like a weight. It was calm, settled. He picked up his phone again, opened the note he had started earlier, and added one more line. Sometimes, just being seen, really seen, is enough to breathe again. He closed the app, stood up, and walked slowly to the counter. Chloe noticed him first. "We good?" she asked, a little unsure. Marcus smiled. "Yeah, thanks for hearing me out." "You deserved better. We'll do better," she said, with conviction. As Marcus turned to leave, Evan finally looked up. Their eyes met for the first time since the exchange began. There was no smile on Evan's face, no apology either. Just a flicker of realization. Maybe discomfort. Maybe something starting to shift. Marcus didn't need more than that. Outside, the sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Marcus pulled his hoodie over his head, placed his hands in his pockets, and started walking. He didn't feel victorious. This wasn't that kind of moment. But he felt grounded, like something that needed to be said had been said, like the weight he carried wasn't his alone anymore. The wind brushed against his cheeks as he turned the corner and blended into the hum of the city. The world outside hadn't changed. Not yet. But maybe a few minds inside that cafe had. And maybe that was enough for today. He kept walking, the rhythm of his steps steady, quiet, assured. No longer trying to disappear. No longer apologizing for taking up space. Just present, just seen, just enough.